Welcome to Talk+Water, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the world of water that does make you waves. I'm going to see if I can get through this without laughing. Okay. My name is Fowler. I'm your host for Talk+Water. I'm also the principal of the Lab for Water Resolution, and I'm here today on Friday, April 14th, with my friends at Matt's El Rancho. And our guests today are not only extremely knowledgeable about what's going on with water in the Texas legislature, but they're all veterans of Talk+Water. And so it's an all-star lineup, folks. And it includes Perry Fowler, who's Executive Director of the Texas Water Infrastructure Network, and Sarah Schlessinger, who is the Executive Director of the Texas Water Foundation, and Jeremy Mazur, who is the Senior Water and Energy Expert at Texas 2036. Was that close enough for everyone?
Todd, I'll take it.
So our subject today is water and the ongoing 88th session of the Texas legislature.
Yes, please. Can I have a margarita with mezcal, at least that's thing, and a Grand Marnier?
Sounds okay?
Sure.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Look at you.
So let the record show that they all three have margaritas. Perry's getting his now. I have a carte blanca, and so
Let the record show that all of these drinks require an immense amount of water to produce.
Water is, there's no beer without water or any other kind of drink, and so that's all you need to know why we should be here talking about water today. So, Jeremy, you want to start off and just kind of give us a snapshot where it's mid-April, for people who are not familiar with the Texas legislature, things that started in January and they start slowly, and now we're in the period when things are really picking up steam and starting to get done.
That's right, Todd. And so for those of you that haven't been keeping score, we have about 45 days, plus or minus a few hours, until the last day of session at the end of May. Session started in early January, and all sessions start relatively quietly, and this one did coming on relatively quietly, which was good, given the rancor and the excitement that was associated with the 2021 session. But we're near the 100-day mark of this session, and what that means is that all eyes are essentially focused on what's happening in the committees in the House and the Senate. The big push right now is to have your bill not only heard in committee, but also to be voted out of committee so that it can be considered on the House or Senate floor, hopefully within the period of next 2 or 3 weeks. What we're coming up to very fast, and these start to kick in come May 5th and 10th, is we have several calendar deadlines in the House, which if your bill's not approved by a committee or if it's not approved on second reading of the House, that bill is essentially dead for the rest of the session. And May 5th and 10th is closer than it seems, even though today's April 14th. And so a lot of rush is right now going on, and a lot of attention being focused on what we can do to get our bills out of committee.
And so, Sarah, the bill that, everybody keeps hearing about, the legislation about water infrastructure kind of dominates a lot of the discussion. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what's going on there first, then we'll get into other areas.
Sure. Well, I think you will hear about the fact that there are a number of really important water bills that have been filed this session that cover a broad range of topics. This has definitely been classified as a water session because of a number of factors, including the fact that we're in drought, including the fact that we have a budget surplus, including the fact that water infrastructure in particular has been in the national discourse as well in the state perspective, thinking about boil water notices, thinking about outages, the influence of winter storms, so on and so forth. And the larger perspective, I think the reason why there's a unique confluence of pressure points right now and why we're talking about water infrastructure and its culmination around Senate Bill 28 is that we've got water infrastructure by and large that's nearing the end of its useful lifespan, that's aging, that's deteriorating, that's causing a conversation about where our population growth, our water supply demands, the cost of infrastructure, as you will hear about as well, our workforce shortages, our agencies being reviewed, and all of that has brought us to a moment in time in history where we're looking at a budget surplus and this critical need for investment in water infrastructure. So the bill that people's eyes are on 1. There are a number of important bills, but it's Senate Bill 28, House Bill 10, which creates which proposes creating a constitutionally protected fund to fund new water projects as well as invest in water infrastructure needs.
How much money's in there? Or do you think it's in there?
We don't know yet.
We don't know. Not enough. It never could be enough. You have moving pieces here in addition to the authorization effectively of these programs. We're also depending on budget negotiations. Right now the House has frankly better numbers than the Senate does. We're seeing figures of $3 billion in the House versus $1 billion in the Senate. We also have more minutia, which I don't want to bore anybody with right now, but if we're looking at SB 28 specifically, those are the numbers that have been outlined for that. It'd be nice if there was more. We certainly need it. But Sarah's right. I mean, this is kind of a confluence of everything happening at once here. We've seen everything that's been happening this last year with infrastructure failures. We have extra money, and this is a money session, it's a money fight. And we have the data to demonstrate and the history to demonstrate that we desperately need investment in our water infrastructure. And in order to accomplish that, the state has to have an effective role in it, which is why this legislation is so important, because it's not only identifying new funding sources, it's got an emphasis on water supply and aging infrastructure, particularly in rural communities where there's been a lack of investment that has really probably been more significant than in urban areas, which certainly have their issues too. It's certainly a great opportunity. So trying to get to that process of crafting it and then getting the funding portion is challenging, and there are a lot of other competing interests right now. Broadband, tax cuts, you name it, it's all out there, and everybody's got their own little bit of money they're fighting for. And I would argue that you can't drink broadband, you can't drink roads, you can't drink tax cuts. We all drink water, we all need water for our economy to work, and this is hopefully not a lost opportunity right now.
What's surprising to me is, Sarah's right. This session did start off as a water session, and I really think at the end of the day, when we look at the bills that are likely to be passed, it will be a significant water session, and the first we've had in several biennia. What surprises me is, just given the energy that we saw coming into this session about the importance of water infrastructure and the magnitude of the problems that we're seeing with regard to drought, with regard to aging, deteriorating water systems, with regard to aging wastewater systems, contaminating our rivers and lakes. You'd think there'd be a lot more bullish discussion about funding for water. But here we are at this point in the session, where, as Perry said, it's $3 billion being proposed in the House, just $1 billion in the Senate. And water is competing with so many other policy priorities like tax cuts, broadband, $8 billion for natural gas power plants. And what surprises me is, 10 years ago, when we had the 2013 session on the heels of the 2011 drought,
we created the SWIFT.
That's right. It was a very bullish session for water. And, members were very out loud and vocal about their enthusiasm for setting aside $2 billion for water. We're seeing some momentum for water, but I just have not seen it to the magnitude or to the bullish extent that I've seen before.
Well, is it because in part, you drive around Austin and it's green and the wildfires are doing great this year. The reservoirs are not recovered and the aquifers are not recovered, but, do you think in some ways, some people are looking around thinking, maybe the drought's not as bad as it was. That's what I always worry about, is that, you have all this momentum in a drought here, right? You go into session, and I was worried about, gosh, I hope it doesn't rain too much during the session. That's sad thing to say, but
you bring up an interesting point, right? Because I think that historically, if we look at the creation of SWIFT, if we look at Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 2, all of those significant pieces of legislation have come at the heels of either a significant drought or significant flood, right? It's been very reactionary. That has been tended to be our approach. I think that the focus on water infrastructure is less about drought, although that is a very important. Our reservoirs have never been so low, right? I think that people are missing the fact that we are in this very significant supply shortage. But I think it's much more about the invisible. I think the reason why there isn't as much momentum around it is that it's really hard to quantify, to think about water loss that's happening in aging infrastructure. It's really hard to talk about the need to invest in something that you're not looking at all the time, right? It's really easy to look at roads when they're falling apart, but it's a lot harder to talk about water infrastructure. It's not, as some people would say, a very sexy thing to kind of bring up that you build momentum around. But I think it's also worth noting from a national perspective that the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act is significant in that it's not the amount of money necessarily that it creates, but that it course corrects years of a lack of federal investment in water infrastructure, and that focus was on rural and disadvantaged communities in particular, and creating an investment opportunity in lead pipe replacement and aging infrastructure. I mean, Jeremy, I keep thinking about the article that you put together about the cost, the high cost, right? We're talking about $1 billion, $30 billion, $5 billion periods, right? It's not nearly enough because the cost associated with what we actually need is so much higher.
Yeah, over the next 50 years, when we aggregate the data, when we look at the cost of the state water plan prepared by the Water Development Board, the state flood plan, and even the dated EPA estimates of what it would take to repair and rehabilitate our aging, deteriorating water and wastewater infrastructure systems, that price tag goes well north of $150 billion over the next 50 years. And
that's based off of today's numbers, right?
Those numbers are not accurate. So
not accurate insofar as they
underreport. Given what we're seeing right now with inflation and everything else, they are not accurate. Add 30% onto that.
You're right.
And it's not going to go down. I hate to break it to you. The cost does not go down once it goes up. It is going to stay right there. We have less spending power right now. That's a fact.
And in addition to that, and this is the conversation that Jeremy and I had throughout the interim, right, was about those rural and disadvantaged communities lack the capacity, both from a workforce perspective and a technical assistance perspective, to access the funds, even if they were available. So we have a baseline going into session of state agencies that are under, all of our water agencies, most of them are under sunset, and they have a capacity issue. All of their funding mechanisms, which Texas is very proud to have a number of sophisticated funding mechanisms for water infrastructure, are oversubscribed, zero capacity to expand, and we've got a bunch of communities that don't have a lack of capacity also to apply for and access those funds.
And then political will also figures into this. At the local level, especially in smaller communities that don't have the means, telling somebody that they're going to have to incur debt to build a $20-30 million project can be difficult, which is why everyone's looking to the state right now. So you have that need that's there that used to have a very strong federal role, as you talked about 50, 70 years ago. We've talked about this before. It used to be different. We used to make these huge investments in our infrastructure. Now it's falling apart. And so you have this lack of political will, lack of capacity. Now we have this historic opportunity. So where's the political will of the legislature? Where's the emphasis there? Okay, $1 billion, $3 billion, great. But who are we being accountable to? What do people really need? What's resonating with voters versus what are the actual needs that are out there? And again, I think it's, look, don't get me wrong. I think it's great that we're doing this right now, but it's not enough, and it's not ever going to be enough, but we can do more. And as the budget discussions continue right now, I'm hoping that there's a prevalent place for water in them. And if there's other vehicles out there that we're not aware of, or that potentially could be heard next week, Jeremy, in a hearing that's going to happen, then we should be looking at that. There are no dedicated revenues for water in the state of Texas. There are not. We don't have taxes. We don't have fees. We don't have any of those things. We capitalize programs. We sell bonds. We have federal funds that we match.
And we rely on a ratepayer base to pay for infrastructure.
And the consumer and ratepayer is going to end up paying for that. Okay? So they're going to pay for it. So how can we aggregate funding to do something meaningful and long term? And that was me just dishing up the queso on chip for you right there, Jeremy.
Oh, yeah, it's putting it's called a layup.
I'm putting you on the spot. That is what I've got.
And so it's we see the issues with drought. We've seen some horrific issues with the consequences of aging, deteriorating infrastructure. I agree. Putting $1 to $2 billion is meaningful, but it doesn't create a long-term solution to fix the problem that we have. And the problem is the acceleration of the deterioration of our infrastructure, the greater and growing risk of our vulnerability to increasing drought conditions. And money's going to be, it's cheaper now than it's going to be in 10, 20 years. So I agree, Perry. I think one of the things we need to look at is a long-term solution to address our water infrastructure. One of the things that we've recommended at Texas 2036 is the creation of a dedicated revenue stream for water. And the good news is next week in the House, there's going to be a bill that'll be heard, thanks to the leadership of Representative Clardy, House Joint Resolution 169, that not only creates a new Texas Water Fund, but also creates a dedicated sales tax revenue stream to that fund for the purposes of financing water infrastructure. Look, we already do this for roads. We already do this for parks. And voters have approved constitutional amendments dedicating sales tax revenue streams or other revenue streams to park funding and roads funding. Perry, as you famously say, you can't drink a road and you can't drink a park. The park thing's new.
If you drink park water, you're probably going to get sick.
You're going to get cryptosporidium for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Fowler. I hate the name of Fowler. The fact that anyway, that's a whole different deal. But you're right. We cannot. And again, I don't want to downplay the importance of what we're discussing and the billions that are being contemplated. That's great, and we're grateful for that. And yeah, maybe it's not enough. Who knows? Let's hope that something happens that's fantastic and amazing. And I'm going to continue to be optimistic about it. But as you're stating, we don't have those types of dedicated revenues, and I think this infrastructure is important. It is, and obviously I'm an advocate for infrastructure, for water infrastructure. But the fact that we don't have any dedicated funding for it it kind of says a lot about our priorities as a state, especially when we're talking about how important water is to the economy. And I keep thinking about Comptroller Hager out doing his tour and talking about how important this is for our economy, and you don't have businesses, you don't have schools, you don't have any of these things without water. In fact, what you said, Sarah, people don't see water plants, they don't see pipes, they don't see the stuff falling apart that our people fix and build all the time, that there's not enough capacity for. And so we're at a juncture here where there's the need to do something bold, and good on Clardy for having the wherewithal to introduce that bill. And I hope it has some legs, because it should be an important part of the discussion. And tell me if I'm wrong here, but wouldn't that also work in conjunction with what's being contemplated in SB 28?
Yeah.
Would that complement that?
It would.
So we talk about our $3 billion and build something to add to that, maybe?
I think what's going to play out is at some point we're going to have a negotiation between the House and the Senate with regard to what's going to be apportioned to water. I mean, the Senate signaled $1 billion, the House is signaling $3 billion. I think suggesting that, let's have a dedicated sales tax revenue stream for water that would provide at least $500 million. Again,
You're getting excited.
Sorry, guys.
I like your mistake there.
Got over my
$5 billion better.
Oh no, I'm into $5 billion.
Well, let's settle at $500 million per biennium for a new water fund. Even if we got $1 billion this session for water, but if we got this dedicated revenue stream, I mean, that would be a truly meaningful investment in water. It would be the first more meaningful investment in water that we've seen in 10 years since they approved the SWIFT in 2015. Right.
Yeah. Well, the Flood Infrastructure Fund, I guess, is another, right?
You're right.
Another fund that doesn't have any money. Oh.
Right, that's oversubscribed. So something that I feel like, Todd, is worth highlighting as well in terms of the budget discussion, because Jeremy's right. Right now, all eyes are on the House, right, and the fact that the clock is ticking. But there's also a focus on what's been happening in the budget, right? So we know that the House budget has a certain amount of dollars that are allocated towards, in particular, the Texas Water Development Board's legislative appropriation requests, a few of their exceptional items,
yes.
Not all of them.
And people stepped up there.
Not all of them. Not all of their FTEs were addressed. So those respond to their capacity requirements. We'll see what happens on the Senate side as well. But I think that there's also this nuance, this discussion that's happening in terms of what the agencies are requesting in order to maintain the infrastructure and momentum that we currently have. And then the Senate Bill 28 or other bills discussion about creating additional funding mechanisms to look at our critical need beyond maintaining the current infrastructure, right? So there's levels and nuance of it that are happening in terms of the budget discussions.
The board, Texas Water Development Board, make sure I stick with my rule here. They had went through cuts several years ago. I mean, they cut a bunch of folks, and so they've never really fully recovered from that. And we're asking to do more and more. The state's getting,
and they haven't increased their staffing since the creation of SWIFT in 2013.
And so let me tell you where the rubber hits the road on that. When we start building these projects, we start trying to process applications and execute projects. When we don't have enough people to do the work that needs to happen on the administrative end, that means that your project is not happening. That means every day it's more expensive. That's just the reality here. I mean, we need to fund this. I mean, we put in the biennial budget. Jeremy, you're going to more on this because you're a staffer. How many billions of dollars are we doing for TxDOT? $10 billion, something like that.
Easily, yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So again, I'm just saying, and again, need the roads, love the roads. But seriously, so we're talking about the state through all of the leveraging and bonds that we do every year, just through what's happened more recently, kind of maybe getting close to that $1 billion mark, maybe. So a tenth of what we're investing as a state or providing that gets paid back, by the way, for the most part. A tenth of what we're investing in transportation infrastructure, we're investing in water. It's kind of sad, And so again, so where are we here? Generational opportunity. This is the big chance. We may not have this chance again. And so here we are.
So it's interesting. There's a little bit of a sanguine outlook here. Wait one moment while we get another round of margaritas.
You gotta take care of it.
Yes. And he needs one too.
Gotcha.
I'll do what
You guys have it?
Yeah.
You okay on your beer?
I'm okay.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Okay, the conversations get more interesting now too.
It's been a long week.
But I think we're a little bit. I'm hearing a little bit of. There's clearly a lot of hope and optimism going into this session with regard to what can be done with water. But at this point, we're not seeing the firm lines crystallize, indicating we're going to see great progress. There's still plenty of live options and great opportunities out there, but in terms of doing what really needs to be done to create a meaningful long-term solution with regard to funding our water supplies, fixing our aging infrastructure, we're just not seeing that.
I think part of it is honestly that this is a complicated and nuanced conversation, right? The one that we're talking about in terms of the funding mechanisms and the workforce and the capacity, all of those things are they're very technical.
Yeah.
And two examples of, I think, goodwill, optimism on this is one, the polling results that Texas 2036 found in terms of voters' likelihood to vote in favor of the allocation of funding towards water infrastructure, right? That was a significant finding. What was it?
89%.
89% of Texas voters indicated that they would approve of a $5 billion investment. I think that's a really good signal. Another good signal is that 73 legislators in the House of Representatives signed up for a Texas House Water Caucus, indicating that they are in some ways interested in and or concerned about water security.
So tell everybody what that is.
So the Water Caucus is a non-voting, non-membership dues educational initiative to just provide legislators and frankly often their staff with a way to understand some of the technical and nuanced conversations around water this session and moving forward. So first and foremost, it's that to just make it a little bit more accessible for them. Two, it's to start to cultivate a next generation of water champion at the legislature because we're missing those. A lot of them have retired. And then three, the hope was that water would be prioritized. So to Jeremy's point, that's really the hope, is to create enough momentum also that water is prioritized.
One more back and fill. Perry, you're talking about the once in a generation opportunity. It's because the budget surplus is so big, right? I mean, there's so much money.
The surplus is big. The rainy day fund, there's money sitting around, and there are certain restrictions on what can be spent. And technically, I've been calling it the Ghost Rider. We've got this SJR, constitutional amendment that doesn't have a dollar figure associated with it. Oftentimes you see these and it'll authorize a fund plus X billion dollars.
I like that,
right
the Ghost
now.
Rider.
Yes, the Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
The Ghost Rider has it's just there's nothing on it right now. So I believe what's being contemplated right now, this money, these billions we're talking about, are GR. That Ghost Rider, that could effectively also authorize rainy day funds. If we might right or wrong here, Jeremy, could we go into rainy day to have additional funding allocated towards that? Is that
Always. Yeah.
right? So what I'm saying is that we're not limited here to that. So but there is more money. Some people think the comptroller estimate is more than $30 billion. Some people think it's 50. So do you want a tax cut that's going to save you $150 a year on your property taxes?
Or do you want to secure water
Or do you want to secure your water infrastructure for the future of the state to ensure that your businesses work and that we don't have wells going dry and
Protect the
people.
value of your home.
Well, right. Okay. So tell me how long you can live without a glass of water.
Oh, and by the way, let's not forget that earlier this week the Department of Interior announced that they're about to tell the states how much water they're going to get out of the Colorado River Basin.
Yeah. All right. So Texas, wake up, Texas. So look at what's happening in Arizona and California. And I actually had a very interesting discussion the other day about a non-related subject matter. But they were talking about how well Texas manages our water, how far in advance we are of other states. But imagine a day here where you have Lake Travis running dry, and the federal government has to come in and start telling people what to do. We were talking to Carlos Rubenstein before and talking about how water is allocated in junior rights and senior rights and all the complicated things in water law in Texas. Imagine when we don't take care of our own business here, the federal government has to come in. We don't want the feds, that's right, see, they're backing me up there. We don't want the feds to come in and tell us what to do. Right, exactly. Yeah, here we are. But seriously, this is our chance to do something to take care of ourselves.
Right.
It really is.
You just hit on something that I was thinking about bringing up, and now I am going to bring it up. So, do you think that the legislature sees what's going on out in western Colorado and takes anything from that at all? What I worry about is that they don't see that that's a warning, and they think, well, almost all the rivers except for Rio Grande really are within the state's boundaries for the most part, and we're kind of an island unto ourselves with regard to our water management, and we don't really need to pay attention to what's happening out there. But to me, it's like a giant warning sign that if we don't get our issues addressed, we can end up in kind of a similar position in a number of ways.
Water, I think, is complicated because of the scale issue, right? Financing water infrastructure is very much about economies of scale. Management of water is very much about scale. And in Texas, we operate on a decentralized management structure that responds to the fact that often water's impacts, availability are local. But you're right. There's a regional, there's a statewide context, there's a eco-region context as well. And the thing that we find that folks forget often is that we all learn the water cycle as children and understand the connectivity between it. I don't think that they're looking at what's happening.
I actually sang the water cycle song at Kuiper Elementary School here in Austin for both Victoria and Caroline's classes. I actually got up there and sang it. So if I can do it, anybody can do it.
I don't have to. Do you remember the song?
I know, do you?
How many more beers do you
Some of it.
Maybe that's the closing credits number.
Oh my gosh! I'll have to,
Todd, this could be a beautiful new future for the
we didn't bring a
podcast.
mezcal for you.
All my listeners won't have any after they hear me sing that. So, just one other thing to mention. I do have a conversation with Lynn Hayer, the comptroller, about the money situation going into the session, which is still available if anybody wants to hear that. So, what about some of the other legislation? Because there's also sunset legislation, right? Tell us about that.
Actually, something that I remembered at one point, Jeremy, as you were talking, is that we went into session knowing that infrastructure at large was was a priority, right? It was a priority. The governor had stated, lieutenant governor, speaker, infrastructure was out there. So I think there was also this opportunity in terms of water infrastructure saying, okay, great. There's an entry point for that conversation, right? And it's also unique timing that Texas Water Development Board, TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and the Public Utility Commission were all undergoing sunset as well. So there was this very specific conversation going on about water in its most fundamental operational capacity, infrastructure, and our state agencies that are regulating it, managing it, funding it, right? I mean, that I feel like that set the tone.
Tell everyone briefly who are not familiar with the sunset process in Texas, what that means, what's going on.
So Jeremy might be better equipped, but my layman's it is the process by which a state agency is reviewed to see whether it's meeting its statutory requirements. From that, there are recommendations on how it can be adjusted, all the way up to abolishing the agency if it is not fulfilling its duties. So it is an audit of whether or not it is functioning correctly.
Sarah nailed it.
Thank you.
Great.
And we can't abolish the water board, for instance, but there be some serious policy matters that are addressed in the course of doing this. It's actually interesting that you mentioned that, because so this summer we started having these hearings coming up and certain issues were identified. And to the board's credit, they addressed a lot of them of their own volition without having to have a legislature take action. And that ranged from all these different issues and identified some of these priorities, like the need for staffing, addressing contracting procedures, which the board actually frankly got out ahead of, and we worked on that with them, because that's the whole point. This all matters. It matters from the funding part to the planning part to the execution, all the way down until we get to actually build a project. All this stuff has to happen. The last thing you get is the project. The last thing you get is fixing your pipes. There are years of preparation that occur before that. The legislature has to make sure that this works properly. The agency has to control it. The locals have to ask for it. The financing has to be done. There's so many moving parts. Just like where the water nerd part really comes in.
The utility has to perform a rate study, which is regulated by the PUC to find out whether affordability.
There's nothing easy about any of this. The easiest part, frankly, is being serious and making a commitment and allocating serious funding. That's the easiest part of all of this. That's the low-hanging fruit. So all this other legislation that's out there, there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good bills out there that talk about science, that talk about groundwater management. Look at our Twitters. Between Jeremy and I feel like we've got probably better information than a lot of people out there in the Twitter sphere. There are communities across Texas which cannot build housing developments because they don't have water. There are municipalities that have said you cannot build these projects. They're doing that on their own. That's happening because that's that significant of an issue. And that's not just the aging stuff. I mean, that's the water supply issue for new stuff. So do we want to continue to grow? I mean, circular conversation here, right? I'm talking about, Glenn Hager. Do we want our economy to grow? Can we continue to sustain the growth that we have? That's the big question mark here. And I'm sorry, but again, you can't drink the internet, you can't drink broadband, you can't drink fiber. That's not going to make the decision about whether or not a community gets built. That's not going to make a decision about whether or not a factory can work, or whether you can grow crops.
Well,
I mean, come on.
Perry, I agree. That we need to grab this funding bull by the horns if we want to start fixing these problems with regard to our water, wastewater infrastructure. That being said, when I look at the bills that are moving this session, I'm seeing some excellent forward progress in some of these other contributing sectors to the water discussion. I mean, there's a very good bill that's passed the House Natural Resources Committee that allows high school students to get a provisional license certification for working as a wastewater operator. And Representative Metcalf has introduced that bill. There's also some great bills that have been moved in the House and in the Senate relating to the data that we use for measuring our groundwater availability. And these were bills that were somewhat unheard of 5 or 6 years ago. And so I think it's positive that we're seeing a greater interest in having better data guide our groundwater use decisions. We're also seeing some, another thing that I'm seeing that I want to talk about is we're seeing a big uptick in the talk about technical assistance. This is discussed throughout Senate Bill 28. Earlier this week, the House Natural Resources Committee passed House Bill 5016 by Representative Kitzman that creates the Texas Technical Assistance Consortium. Who's a water guy? Yes. Yeah, it's wonderful that he's here. And I have to say, I want to stop and say, the House Natural Resources Committee has some excellent members. The Speaker made some fantastic appointments. A lot of members are engaged and enthusiastic about water.
People want in that committee now.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Water is cool in the House, not like it never was. But
order the nachos.
I did. I smelled the smell of the refried beans in Mazur intoxicating. And I pull in the parking lot and just I can't. Sorry, you got to do it.
I'm all for it.
There is a state law that makes it illegal to not get the nachos.
Yeah. Okay.
Or there should be at least.
I'm for that.
Thank you.
But I was talking about the technical assistance, and I think there's a growing recognition that we have our state programs. And we have our 10,000 plus water and wastewater operators out there, many of which have issues. And technical assistance providers are these third-party providers that do a good job of bridging the gap between these communities with water infrastructure problems and our state's financial assistance programs. And so I'm pretty excited about the growing recognition we're seeing in the House and the Senate side on the need for more technical assistance. And I think this will do wonders to really expand the ability of our state financial assistance programs to reach these small, rural, and disadvantaged communities that have fallen through the cracks.
So define a little bit more what you mean by technical assistance, because that might mean a lot of things to a lot of different people listening.
That's a good question.
Yeah, technical assistance in the water world these are typically third-party organizations. And in Texas, we have the Water Finance Exchange, the Texas Rural Water Association, as well as Communities Unlimited. And these are folks that go out into the field, if you will, and they work with communities that have expressed that they have a problem with their system, or they may be tipped off by TCEQ as there's all these communities
being out of compliance
that are sanctioned or out of compliance, and these folks just go out there and work with communities to identify what the problems are with their systems, to recommend solutions that would fix the problems that lead to non-compliance. But also, more importantly, technical assistance provides it liaises between these communities and the state. We don't see this in Austin, but I think there's a high wall of separation between the functions of Austin, the legislature, and state agencies, and what actually goes on in all other 200 plus counties in the state.
So let's dig into that a little bit. We have 7,100 districts, right? Mm-hmm. From little mom and pop districts in City Houston.
When you say districts, you mean water districts?
Yeah, like,
sure.
MUDs and such.
Oh yeah, we could have a long conversation about how those are defined, but yes.
And they don't, they may be very small and may not know how to put a grant together or something.
Yep.
The Water Development Board. So it includes things like that. How they can practically go out and get the money that they need, which is, these programs have been set aside to help them, but, just the money being there is maybe not enough. They've got to figure out how to go get it.
But sometimes also to be eligible for those funding opportunities, you also have to go through asset management. You have to go through a rate study. You have to know what the state of your infrastructure is, what the best opportunity would be, and then also, are you financially eligible for it? Do you have the right, that there's an entire world within that. So technical assistance can mean a number of things, and there are different entities that are targeting different elements of that. So in the federal funding conversation, there's also an opportunity for people to recover some of their technical assistance costs, right, and allowing them to access some of those funds. So there are people that are uniquely looking at that opportunity as well. But there's a compounding issue that I would be completely remiss. You heard me say earlier, I'm going to talk about workforce.
Don't be remiss.
But especially when we're talking about rural communities. So we have 3 primary workforce challenges in the water sector in Texas. And this is true at a national scale, but we have a high number of retirement eligible workers, almost a third of the sector. And that's at the utility scale. That's true throughout the sector. I mean, multidisciplinary. The second is that our agencies have a severe lack of capacity. We heard through their sunset that TCQ has over 400 open positions right now. The Texas Water Development Board hasn't increased their staffing. So at the agency level, the folks that are being asked to disperse those funds, there's a capacity issue. And the third compounding issue is that we have some of the most non-competitive salary ranges in the nation. So a typical wastewater operator is making $37,000 a year, which means that it would be easier for them to go make a living wage working for Buc-ee's or HEB than working frontline critical water infrastructure, right, in the height of the pandemic. And these are documented. So I'm gonna share with you some breaking news that we just got today from our workforce study that over 60% of the water sector right now is reporting having severe water workforce shortages. They are deeply concerned about it.
The survey said something.
Good question, Dr. Fowler.
Great survey.
This is a fantastic survey that we did with the Texas Water Foundation, TWCA, WEED, AWWA, all the water groups. Actually looked at this and improved it before we sent it out.
I've been peer pressured.
And we put the numbers together here with Dr. Fowler, and so we asked people if they were concerned about their current and future workforce. 70% of respondents said they were concerned and that they had issues. So yeah, it's a big deal. We got to fund it. We have to maintain it, and that's kind of shocking because we always talk about what a great career in construction is. We're paying a hell of a lot more to be a basic skilled worker in construction than however many $1,000 a year.
Yeah.
In fact, we're paying up close probably to 80, 100. So if anybody wants to get in construction, listen to this, let's do it. But my goodness, we should be incentivizing people to be in our water workforce. What a critical job. Look at what's happening in Austin right now. Austin Water went and did a total audit of their operations after all this stuff happened, and they've done a bang-up job in going in and addressing a lot of these things. One of the issues that they identified was workforce retention, trying to be able to attract and retain employees. But that's the same across our entire economy right now.
Right.
Same in state agencies. I mean, we want to keep these people, we want to train them and keep them. And so we need to find people that are passionate about water, that want to get into it, providing availability for them to get trained, to get involved in some way, shape, or form. I mean, this should be an area where people want to be involved, right? And it's scary. So what are the alternatives to not having people? You can't fully automate everything. A computer can't fix a pipe. It can't go replace a pump.
Not yet, at least.
I think we're a pretty good ways off, but maybe one day when we're all living leisurely lives and we don't have to do anything, we just let the machines do everything for us.
Is that a Star Wars Mandalorian reference?
No, but it's a fantastic show, actually.
It is.
It is. Enjoy it immensely. Like my sci-fi. But no, these are real problems. We have real data. I mean, and that's the cool thing about what's happening right now. We're getting more and better data, which justifies the needs, which identify the areas where we need to make investments, where we should be prioritizing public investment, where should we be allocating public dollars effectively. And so, again, back to this circular conversation, here we are. We have this chance to do something significant, knowing that there's probably no amount of money that can solve all of these issues. It takes all of these things working together. It takes the technical aspects. It takes the industry folks. It takes the policy people. It takes the people on the ground. Texas Water was just happening this week. I mean, it takes the guys that are going out doing these competitions to see how fast they can replace a pipe, to do asset management, to assess the state of infrastructure. So many moving parts.
So many loud trucks.
So many loud trucks.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So
because the population is booming.
Right. Because how many people do we have now in our little college hamlet?
Too many.
It's way over a million.
So can you reel us back in, Jeremy, somehow?
Well, the thing that I always think on the workforce thing, and you guys have made some excellent points about it, is all the state investments that we make in water infrastructure they're worthless if we don't have the workforce in place to operate these systems.
The human infrastructure?
Yes.
As it were?
Yeah, that's as it were. I think it's a good way of putting it. So, but the good news is, we're seeing a little bit of forward motion there. Once you get a bill like Representative Metcalf's bill past this session, that maybe opens the door for a bigger conversation that we need to have over the interim and next session. So I'm a little bit bullish on some of these things that we're looking at with regard to infrastructure funding and perhaps workforce development, even better data, because we're seeing some great ideas that are new, that are coming up, being discussed in committee, they're passing. And so this really does open some big doors and substantial opportunities for future discussions.
And I would argue, as the eternal optimist here, that I think this is the first session that I've observed, at least, a lot of coordination and partnership exists between various statewide agencies and organizations that would have previously been not competing per se, but having to work within their specific lanes because the policy that was being advanced was going to affect them differently. But there is a very different coalition of voices that has been built. If I can put it that bluntly, that is really just recognizing the unique moment, the unique urgency, and the fact that we need some funding allocated, some attention paid to it. And I think that is a really unique and actually positive thing to look at as well, is that there is a certain still kind of unifying factor that's happened.
It's a coalition. Most of the water groups, put it together at the beginning of the session. We've got over 60 different organizations.
All of the statewide water organizations.
Every statewide water organization, business groups, agriculture, cities, counties. People have said collectively that this should be a priority, and you're right. It is different. The dynamic is changing, and it should. And I don't think it's just because of the money. I think it's because there's an increasing level of awareness that this is important. And I look at where we are now versus where we were last summer, and I was doing an interview a week about pipe breaking here and these people running out of water and everything else. And we've got a short attention
Every
span.
boil water notice.
Every boil water notice in Texas, big towns, small towns, like all this stuff happening. But there is a different level of awareness right now that I think is significant. And so all these things are growing. And so the volume of good policy and things that are being discussed, I think people that are realizing that it's important for their constituents to be actively involved in water, that is changing. That's good. That is a good thing. It's positive.
And I think there's also a couple other sleeper issues that are out there too that are coming up. One of the issues that I'm pretty excited about is the discussion about water markets is having a little bit of a resurgence here. And Todd, this is a little bit layup for you and me, but there's a bill by Representative Bowers that'll be heard next week that provides for the non-cancellation of a water right by TCEQ, provided that water right is if part of that water right's being used for in-stream or environmental flows. That's a type of transaction that we want to encourage with regard to our surface water rights. There's another bill by Representative Goldman that would allow regional water planning groups to identify opportunities for water markets as a way to manage water within the regions as a water management strategy. And so I think one of the things we're interested in seeing from Texas 2036, not only is greater investment in water infrastructure and water supply and so forth, but what are some other ways we can think about water, and how can we use markets to incentivize more efficient and effective use of our water resources?
You brought up earlier also another sleeper issue that I predict in future sessions that we might pick up with more concentration, but I've really been pleased to see how it has come up subtly in the conversation through the interim reports, through the session, is water data. I really think, there are other states that have advanced open water data legislation, including California, including New Mexico, that is focusing on how it is that you incentivize the creation of water data that's interoperable, that's accessible, that's findable, right? All of these concepts. But I think just in the recognition of water loss and the importance of that data and thinking about our overall water budget and supply demands, there is a subtle conversation that's happening there about the importance of water data as well. And that has been really missing. I think that in the past there was more fear around the use of water data because it felt like it transgressed or went over some of the
data is scary because it's real.
Data is scary because it's
like
real.
Science.
That's right. But I have felt a very subtle shift in the narrative this session, this interim, where we're suddenly embracing data as being an important management tool as well.
Right, but let's look at it in these terms too. So, we talk about water conservation. It's very important. The value of water
and efficiency, conservation, efficiency.
Yes, but when you're losing 30% of your water in your system,
that's right.
You can go out and tell consumers that they should do this and that, but I mean, come on, it's about maintaining integrity of your system. Should be first and foremost, and this is the little dirty secret that people are going to hate me for saying right now. But water utilities make money when you're losing water on the other end of the meter before it's their stuff. Okay, so trying to adjust people's habits about watering lawns and doing all these things, that's great. We should all be conscious about that. But fix your stuff. Okay? If you know where you have problems.
I'm glad you bring that up, Harry, because I find myself often having this honestly philosophical conversation within myself about we're building a statewide water campaign with the initial premise of trying to advance conservation and efficiency targets, right? It's expanded beyond that. But one of the questions that we've come up against is how you measure those targets. And I think often we think about it at the individual scale, right? Your lawn watering habits, whether you're turning off the tap when you're brushing your teeth, some of those habits. But the truth is that a lot of our water conservation and supply projections are at the systemic level, right? The targets go far beyond what the individual actually has the capacity to impact, and has much more to do with the infrastructure and overall how we're looking at efficiency and the use of the resources. And so I feel like often the conservation and efficiency dialogue is limited to the implication or the demand on the individual to change their behavior, when really the behavior change has to come at the systems level, is what we're looking at.
Well, that's what you see in the water market in Minneapolis, is that's exactly what happened. And because the folks who had water rights had a whole different set of incentives once the market was created, and it was limited how much they could use. And so that's what, we're going to get into all that yet, but that's, to me, that's like one of the places.
Can we do that episode Dirty Water Secrets? Is that?
Well, just like Ghost Riders and Dirty
Water Secrets. There you go. Yeah.
The water puns are endless.
We don't even want to go there because that could go south and blue very, very quickly.
Well, if we're going to do the dirty water secrets, we should at least have the wastewater people at the table.
Right.
That's
Agreed.
a horrible pun.
Anyway.
So here's a question. So, if there were like the top three things, we've seen all these bills that have been introduced, technical assistance, data, workforce, funding, constitutional amendments, $3 billion, $1 billion, $0 billion.
$0 billion.
That's still an option.
No, that's not an option, Jerry.
$0 billion, and that reminds me of this almost empty tray of nachos right here.
Right.
There's still two there.
There's still two.
This might be this might be a predictive nacho plate.
Okay, well, this might matter here, so let's pay attention.
Sorry, Jeremy, please continue.
So you can only pick two. Out of all these things that we've talked about, only two at the end of the day could pass, and you would call that a successful water session. What are those two things, Sarah?
Easy. Infrastructure funding, and workforce is the category I'd put it under, but I would say meeting the capacity needs of our agencies. Funding for the infrastructure and capacity, those are the two I would pick.
Okay, so wrong answer. So it's the funding has like $1 billion, $3 billion, or
$0 billion.
You just got to set up.
I got set up for
or $0 billion, or the dedicated revenue stream. You can only pick one of those.
Sorry.
I may have been unclear.
My brain was already going ahead. That's a hard question. Can I think about it? Can I phone a friend?
Yeah, you can phone a friend. Perry.
It just so happens that I'm right here right now.
Perry, what would you pick?
We need to be able to establish a fund that's flexible, that addresses a lot of these issues that aren't addressed right now, and we need money to back it up. I'm sorry, but that you can't do anything without resources, and all this other stuff we've talked about costs money. it costs money, y'all.
Perry, wrong answer.
It's the dedicated is what you're going for. So let me, hold on, Jeremy.
Jeremy's trying to trick
You set us up. You set us up here because here's the thing. I believe my understanding of reading the joint resolution is that the idea is to create a constitutionally protected fund that has the potential to continue to receive funding, right? So my selection is, without stripping away the current politics, is a dedicated revenue stream towards water infrastructure is the correct answer.
But we need a vehicle to...
We need a vehicle for that.
Okay. I feel like we're getting somewhere.
We are getting somewhere.
Teamwork makes the dream work. All right, Jeremy, so are we still wrong? Or
No. I was just saying, all I was saying is, we have all these options that have been laid out this session. $1 billion, $3 billion, dedicated revenue source, workforce development, better data, technical assistance. What would be the two things that you would want to see pass at the end of the session for it to be successful? I heard Sarah say, revenue dedication.
Revenue and workforce.
It's an answer?
Yes.
Okay. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just trying to gauge what your priorities are.
This is me, Sarah Schlessinger, by the way, rather than Texas Water Foundation, just for the record.
That's a good caveat to have.
Yeah.
Do we all do these disclaimers?
Sure.
No, I think that the funding aspect of it is incredibly important. And if you're trying to get me to commit to a specific vehicle, there's only one I know right now that I think that is two that are really viable.
Mm-hmm.
And if the legislature, if all we have to choose between is $1 billion or $3 billion, then the Senate needs to step up and meet the House numbers. And that's just me speaking outside the class. Somebody wants to get mad at me, you can come find me. I'm walking around a hat. I got a mustache. You can find me. It needs to be the higher of the two numbers, and we need to have a vehicle to spend that money and put it into accounts that we need. And that's what it all boils down to. And in my view, and if I'm still wrong, I'll accept being wrong and I'll own it. And it's Friday, and I'm gonna stick with that.
But we know from the start of this conversation that we've got an $80 billion price tag just on implementing the state water plan. We have a much higher number when it comes to repairing our aging infrastructure.
And that doesn't even contemplate wastewater. That's like half the equation. So
really, the truth is that our consensus opinion here, Jeremy, I might be so bold, is to say as much money as we can get right now is the right answer, because the total number is so huge.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would agree with your selected answers. I think that
really, you don't say.
It was an open-ended question. There was no right answer or wrong answer.
This is an interrogation.
It sounds a little bit like a blueprint. I can't imagine why.
Not yet. It's with interrogation.
He's working his way there. Just
right. Yeah, we'll get to it. No, but it's interesting to say. I agree with you both, Sarah and Perry, that at the end of the day, we need to have a more focused, more dedicated revenue stream for water infrastructure. We know the costs are going to be monumental over time. In the price of failure, in some communities, will be catastrophic. For me, I think the other thing that I would probably push would be the workforce angle, because it's intuitive, very easily to recognize that it makes no sense to spend all this money in putting out these water infrastructure solutions, new systems in communities where there's absolutely no human being that's available to operate. I mean, it's like flushing money down the toilet.
I'm sorry to be this person, but the geographer in me can't help it. But I find myself saying this often to the engineers and to folks that want to understand what built or technology solution is going to solve a water security crisis. And the truth is that most of it is a regulatory and a human policy issue, a human behavior, right? And a huge part of that is the workforce component. So the human infrastructure that I allude to is just as important as the infrastructure projects that we built.
You know what's funny about that? As I look at the survey that we conducted here, the top issues driving infrastructure investment are aging infrastructure. The second one is regulatory compliance. It's all about population growth and diversifying water supplies.
It's people.
It's people. We need water.
I agree with that.
I mean, the technology that we use, the infrastructure that we're selecting, it's not groundbreaking. There's no new solution or new technology that's going to solve things. It's going to be a system that solves things. It's going to be people interacting with that system that's going to solve things.
So you're not going in for moisture traps in the wind to like solve our.
We no longer live in an era where we believe that the construction of a new reservoir is going to solve things.
I don't know about that. I don't know. I think a lot of people believe that.
I think I'm not saying that it's not an important strategy, as is desal, as is aquifer storage recovery, as is reuse, as is all of these other strategies. But the thing that I find myself saying to people is just like our financial portfolios, we need diverse water strategies in order to have a secure water future.
So the one thing I will say about this session,
we never heard what the right answer is, by the way.
What is the right answer?
Well, there was no right answer. It was an open-ended question. So, do we need to have another Texas Plus Water segment about open-ended answer? Open-ended.
We're still using the Socratic method okay, I got you.
Yeah, it was Socratic.
Thank you.
So, one thing I'm going to say though is, I think with 65-75% certainty that we're going to have a water joint resolution pass this session. And what that means is that there's going to be another election in November.
The constitutional amendment.
That's right, a constitutional amendment on water for voters to consider. I think the polling data that we have at Texas 2036
gives me hope. Thank you.
Well, good, and it gives us hope too that water's water's a winner. Water's a winner when it comes to polling. But I think it's also going to open the door for an expanded conversation and public discussion about water infrastructure and water needs in the state throughout the summer into the early fall. And so I think that's kind of a good opportunity for us. I wonder, what can we do with that opportunity? What points need to be made, and how can we use that to build this into something bigger?
Yeah. So I can interrupt there and say we've gone a full hour, so we need to go to final thoughts.
Oh gosh.
So who wants to go first?
Ladies first. I'm Liz Ben.
My final thoughts are that I think that the challenges have never been bigger, but I'm actually hopeful that our decision makers are at least intuitively aware that our water security issues have never been more urgent, and I'm hopeful that we will pass something that, whether it meets a portion of our needs right now or continues to meet them in the future, that this will be a first step. And so I'm hopeful that we will pass something that makes a difference.
I hope that this is not a wasted opportunity, and I'm privileged to be in the company of colleagues that are collegial and thoughtful, and that is what is reflected in the water advocacy industry. And I hope that our political leaders will have the political will to do something significant, because they've all said that it's a priority, and I want them to please step up, and I would challenge them to do that, from the governor's office down to, and frankly, it's kind of interesting because I feel like Charles Perry and Tracy King have stepped up.
They have.
I want to see Dr. Bonin and Jeff Huffman step up. I want to see Dave Phelan, and I want to see Dan Patrick back it up and exert their will and force to make something happen. Because ultimately they're going to do this, which is why part of this is so frustrating. The unknowns are frustrating. Which is why we want to have this trust and faith in these people to do the right thing and to do big stuff. And I'm using my big voice right now. I'm just saying
all caps.
Come on, y'all. Let's do this, because we have the vehicles and the people are willing and ready to go, and we know that. So let's do something about this. It's time time to do it. And I'm very proud of what we've all accomplished as a community, and I love where the conversation is going at this table today and just generally. But it's time. Like, this is the right time to do it, and so I hope people actually follow up what they're saying they want to do and what they support. And I'm just happy to be here and be a part of that in some small shape or form. So that's all I got.
Good deal. Gary?
Well, I think this is on track to be a good Texas water session. And so while there are several elements that would contribute to a perfect water session, I think we need to be mindful, not let the good be the enemy of perfect. We're going to have hopefully some funding for water infrastructure, which is good. There's more focus on technical assistance for small, rural, and disadvantaged communities. This is new and good.
Yes.
There's a greater focus on data for guiding how you manage your groundwater and even your surface water resources. This is good. What the lesson I may be walking away from here in 50 days is that even though this may be a good water session, there is just so much more that needs to be done. We don't really have another 10 years until we can come back and have another big water session like this.
Right.
And so there's going to be a challenge on the water community and water leaders or whoever those people are we need to sort of double down in talking about the importance of our water resources, both built and natural, the importance of our workforce, all these things. I think we made a good point leading into this session, but I think there's some bigger points that we need to emphasize after this session. So I say it's going to be a good water session at the end of the day, and we have to commend our legislative leadership in the House and Senate for making this
for
taking a chance.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the session can still go off the rails now that I said that and nothing passes.
It could all go to shit in a minute. Sorry.
There it is.
Sorry.
I almost got through when you not.
That's for Dave Minamura.
But we can't let this good session, we can't stop at this good water session.
You're right.
There's so much more work we got to do.
That's really well said.
And I share your optimism.
I agree. That's so well said. Unless, of course, the drought continues, at which point we certainly will have good luck in the future.
Somebody's like, oh man, geez, we screwed up. We should have done more.
Yeah.
You know what? The next drought's right around the corner, y'all. It always is. I mean, lest we forget. Tom, what do you think about that?
We may be in it. Who knows? I mean, it may be right now. You never know when the one is going to
Oh, we're in it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what worries me a little bit. When you drive around Austin right now,
It feels so nice this afternoon, too.
Right.
Man, it's
But
lovely.
when you go out to Lake Travis, or if you go down to Hayes County and look at Jacobs Well, the drought is not anywhere near over. So
We could always call Dr. Mace right now, but we'll do that next time.
that's right.
As Carlos says, Texas water policy history has always been driven by the weather.
Yeah.
We are just one long, prolonged drought punctuated by disastrous flood.
Right.
It's a good line.
Yeah. Very good.
Sure.
Can you bleep that last part out for me?
I can believe your whole part out. I am not technically savvy in that way.
Okay. I apologize to everyone who's offended by
Don't worry about it.
I support it, Perry.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I was not
It's
offended.
called
Thank you.
be colorful, which is, it has to,
To the urgency and the significance of this session.
Yes, and the interest
Very good. All right.
podcast too, right? So, okay, wrapping it up with my three veteran Talk+Water guests. Here at Matsell Rancho, where we're discussing the 88th session of the Texas Legislature. My thanks to Jeremy Mazur, to Harry Fowler, and to Sarah Schlessinger for coming out early in the afternoon. I mean, you guys started kind of early. I was worried about that. It worked out well. It did work out well. So, thank you again, and thank you for tuning in to Talk+Water. Let's talk water again soon.